America's most famous and famously expensive lamps. This morning, Martha Teichner tells us the story of the legendary designer whose work was a glass act.
The name Louis Comfort Tiffany will forever be associated with these iconic stained glass lamps. But what about Clara Driscoll and her Tiffany girls? Their story proves the old adage, behind every great man, there's a woman. Later this Sunday morning, Louis Comfort Tiffany in a new light.
Pardon me for saying so, but it was a glass act and a class act. A craftsman with a famous name began designing lamps more than a century ago. Lamps that are admired and imitated to this day. This, by the way, is an imitation. Martha Teichner now with the real story behind the real thing.
When you see real Tiffany glass for the first time, every discount store or restaurant chain knockoff Tiffany lamp becomes an insult.
You know, nature is not one color. Look at the variety of color in the blossoms themselves.
Alice Cooney Frelinghuysen is curator of an exhibition at the Metropolitan Museum in New York of the Tiffany glass that Louis Comfort Tiffany displayed at Laurelton Hall, his palatial, wisteria-draped Long Island country home.
One visitor remarked that she felt it was almost impossible to distinguish where the real ones left off and the leaded glass ones began.
The wisteria is not only a signature design associated with Tiffany, it's a clue in a scholarly detective story, as you shall see. So, this is a famous one?
This is perhaps one of the most famous Tiffany lamps, the wisteria lamp.
Now listen to this.
It was very exciting to read in Clara Driscoll's letters that, in fact, it was her design. And
who? Clara Driscoll? Didn't Tiffany do his own designing? Margie Hofer is a curator at the New York Historical Society, which has another exhibit about Clara Driscoll and the Tiffany girls. Over the course of 20 years, Driscoll was head of the women's, as opposed to the men's, glass-cutting department at the Tiffany studios. The Tiffany girls worked for her.
And the idea that really a single woman was responsible for virtually all of the floral-themed, the nature-themed shades is really turning around Tiffany scholarship.
But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Louis Comfort Tiffany, born in 1848, the son of the founder of the famous jewelry store, first made his name as an interior decorator to the rich and famous of the 1880s. He did the home of Mark Twain in Hartford, Connecticut. His workshops began designing pretty much anything Tiffany put in a client's house, including stained and leaded glass windows and lamps. The color was in the glass itself. It wasn't painted on, an innovation that made Tiffany glass world famous.
The glass selector would be responsible for finding just the perfect piece of glass. And then the glass cutter would use a tool just like this, a glass cutter, to score around the template.
And here is where Clara Driscoll and the Tiffany girls come in. The men worked on the geometric shades, the women on the floral designs. They made equal pay, but women had to quit if they got married.
Clara even expressed frustration when her workers would leave because they got married. That was the custom.
Clara Driscoll made $35 a week, good money at the turn of the century, but the lamps we now know she designed would sell for as much as $750. Only the rich could afford them.
An allamanda, laburnum, roses, and then the rest are all daffodils.
Enter Tiffany experts Nina Gray and Martin Eidelberg, friendly rivals up to some scholarly sleuthing, who independently discovered hundreds of the long, detailed letters Clara Driscoll wrote to her family.
I just blurted it out and said, "You won't believe what I found. Letters from Clara Driscoll." And she replied in this kind of deadpan voice, "I already know them."
An old newspaper story made Eidelberg and Gray aware that Clara Driscoll had designed this dragonfly lamp, which won a prize at the Paris World's Fair of 1900.
It would look like a globe of fish.
What they found out from her letters was how many other Tiffany classics were hers.
The base would be a conventional seaweed and shells coming up 5 sides of the lamp, and she has a little picture. So.
And here is the lamp.
Was it always thought that the major force was Tiffany himself?
Absolutely.
To be fair, none of his designers got name credit. They worked for his companies. And Tiffany clearly valued Clara Driscoll. He took her to Europe along with another designer for an entire summer of sketching and painting. In 1909, Driscoll left Tiffany Studios to get married.
Here he is really at a time when I think he was happiest.
Artists may have worked for him, but Louis Comfort Tiffany himself was quite a piece of work. He wore white suits and adored flowers and built himself an exotic 84-room fairy tale of a country house on Long Island.
It was enormous, nearly 600 acres.
Laurelton Hall was completed in 1905. And man, the parties he threw there. Egyptian and Roman-themed costume extravaganzas. Guests were served peacock at one event. Bunches of daffodils made of glass held up his terrace.
Tiffany was the designer, the artist of the entire estate.
But mostly Laurelton Hall was a showcase for the best of Tiffany's work, the most beautiful of the stained glass windows. On display, the most incredibly sophisticated of the vases.
Its whole use is completely denied in this because you can't really put anything in it.
So this is not water in it, that's glass.
That's not water, that is glass.
He invented a name, Favril, for his hand-blown glass.
Based on an old word, an Old English word, fabrial, meaning handmade or craftsmanlike. Very irregular.
These, believe it or not, were made 100 years ago.
It's called lava glass because it's meant to look a little bit like molten lava.
Louis Comfort Tiffany wanted Laurelton Hall to be his legacy, a sanctuary where artists could come and study. But once he died in 1933, the money began to run out. The house and most of its contents were sold. In 1957, Laurelton Hall burned down. Some of the most beautiful stained glass windows, now on view against plain walls in the Metropolitan Museum, were literally picked from the rubble. Looking at them here, you can't help trying to imagine what it would have been like, seeing them as Louis Comfort Tiffany wanted them to be seen.